Okay, all right. So we're back here again. I'm recording this video a day after I wrote the actual post, hence the difference in dates, the 19th on the video, the 18th on the post. But today we're going to talk about my latest post that went up late yesterday called The Viral Nature of Institutionalized Uncertainty. This is a post that was difficult to write, mostly because it says things that I'm probably not supposed to say in public. A few things before we get into the meat of this thing. The video background has changed after talking with a buddy of mine, using old video games material, which I was doing for the video prior to this. Looped clips of the Eye of the Beholder 2 introduction. That might be some copyright problems with that. There's like 20 people who watch these videos, so I don't think it really matters that much, but at the same time, there's certain ethics, and even if it doesn't matter, it still matters, which is kind of the whole fucking point. So, yeah. Anyway, this is this video's going forward, at least for the time being, until I can go research the copyright situation behind Eye of the Beholder 2, because I really do like those clips, and it took a lot of work to make them, well, comparatively a lot. Anyway, that game might very well not be in copyright from 1992 anymore. I believe the standard copyright term is 25 years, but that requires some digging, because who knows? Because that property is currently owned by EA, so yeah, I don't want to piss them off and get copyright strikes. I'm not making any money off this channel, so I don't give a shit about getting demonetized. But that being said, I don't want a copyright strike either. So for now, we're using royalty-free stuff that didn't cost me a dime. That came off of Pixabay. Credit to Tommy Video, the creator. That's not the exact title. I've got it at the bottom, blue and purple lines. But yeah, you can go find this on there. Just look up Tommy Video on Pixabay and you'll find it. Anyway, thank you, Tommy Video. I love your work, and I've got a few of these downloaders who will be cycling through them on various videos is the idea for the moment. So, and it is way less work than recording the old game footage, because that's what I did with the Eye of the Beholder 2 stuff anyway, and then going through the video editor, doing all that. So we're back to me just winging this in OBS basically. So less work. So all right. Anyway, so the viral nature of institutionalized uncertainty. I wrote this post because earlier this week I had quite the day, and in some ways quite the day at work, right? And in some days it was no different than any other day. I attempted to build structured things while keeping from drowning in the torrent of chaos and uncertainty that is the environment where I'm paid to do such work. And to be fair, that's not specific to my current employer. That's just the nature of tech. Things over the last few years, and maybe it's just my perception, but I don't believe so, because I hear this feedback from a lot of other people I work with too. They're just not as public and open about it, but things are just chaotic in general, and it's not even just work. Like in 2026, chaos is literally the name of the game. It's we really are living in some kind of fucked up year at this point, but nevertheless, work reflects that, the world reflects that. So in any event, right, on any given day, the reality is I never really succeed in building or accomplishing as much as I think I would like to do at the beginning of the day. I mean, one of the things I try to do, and has become increasingly ceremonial, is it's not really quite so useful now, is when I sit down at work for the morning. I work from home, so I sit down in this office in this very chair, and my work stuff is up, and I spend a few minutes, I get acquainted, get a feel for the things that I need to do out there, and then I go take a shower. And while I'm in the shower, I try to figure out what am I going to try and do today. What are my goalposts? And it used to be that this ritual was very effective, and it let me set realistic goals. It gave me a sense of progression, right? Which to me is very, very important. Lately it's not been quite so effective, and that's because things happen. A lot of things happen. A lot of unexpected things. Some of them are negative consequences from previous choices. Some of them are things that have nothing to do with us. Some of them are just a side effect of a twisted bureaucratic system, right? But yeah, so needless to say, as my career has gone forward in the last few years, forward. That's an interesting word to choose for it. I don't nowadays. I used to generally succeed in meeting those goals, but nowadays it's much rarer to get that satisfaction. It just because there's just so many things that seem to come up, not necessarily related to me or directly to the team I'm on or anything like that. It's just there's a general feeling of chaos. A front of it that just seems to roll in, and it can roll in at any given time, and it's not really predictable. You can go from the exact right environment that is conducive towards really getting things done to suddenly you've got 10 different things, 10 different people who want 10 different things that just randomly just crawled out of the woodwork, like right, that kind of thing. Anyway, so this does not help my own review of my own work, right? Because this is one of the primary mental tricks I use to try and keep myself on the straight and narrow and steady, and have a a realistic view as to how I am doing, right? And so this contributes to my harsh review of my own performance, which is growing harsher by the day, the week, whatever. And it's almost certainly contributing to my now dueling, apoplectic, and depressing views of my work in general. We will be discussing those views today, basically. So, to be clear, this is a follow-up post I made to a post I made in May of 2018 called Unplanned Obsolescence. You can click through to the text version of this and get a link directly to that post. This is relevant because of the topic and what I'm about to say. Is that post really was written when I worked for the same place I work for now, only I was working out the final days of my notice, because this will be the second time I've worked there. And so it's interesting. This post is less about the place and more about the industry. I want to make that very clear. I'm not going to be mentioning a lot of specific work things. I will be quoting something from a conversation I had earlier this week, but it's not, this isn't really about my employer so much as it is about the industry at large. I'm not looking for another job. I'm not going to look for another job because, there's no point. Like, everything is just kind of, it's like a background radiation level of fucked right now, right? So, in any event, I do happen to be employed with the same people. That may strike you as odd, but it doesn't sit that way with me. In my older age, I've become exceptionally aware of the cyclical nature of the universe, this newfound knowledge, and it's not newfound, but it becomes increasingly relevant, right? It's something I've recognized in the past, but now it's something else, right? So anyway, this newfound knowledge has made me cynical in ways that even I couldn't have imagined 8 years ago when I wrote that original post. And it was a cynical post, right? Back then I felt like an old man. Today I am an old man. Back then I felt like I was beginning to become detached from the industry. Today I am detached from the industry. Back then I felt like I could still find a path forward simply by finding the appropriate niche to occupy. Today I know that is just a sweet little lie I told myself because the truth was too hard to face. Financially, it's a truth that I'm still not ready to face. After I left this job initially, I spent a few years working for somebody that I had some prior professional history with. While it started off great, he eventually turned the arrangement on his head and found a way to screw me, as he tends to do to everybody. So it's not really personal, he's just a special kind of next level asshole. But the truth is, he's rich, and rich people generally are special next level kinds of assholes, right? He's actually the richest person I know, and I say no in a very... I don't like knowing this person at this point. But anyway, if you'd like, you can read all about that delightful fellow in another past post called Pop Goes the Gaslighting Weasel. After I got done with that fun fest, I went to work for a luxury custom lighting company. And while they were some of the nicest people I've ever worked with, and I probably should have just stayed there, I just couldn't. Most of the reasons why were adequately captured in another previous post called Low Code Software Development is a Lie, which is probably the most popular thing I have ever written. So that's an interesting aside there. That went up on Hacker News, and I didn't put it up on there, and it got some play. Like, that's the one thing I've ever written on this blog that got serious play. Yeah. So it was actually, I had a buddy of mine. I don't know if he still reads any of the tripe I'm putting out, but he actually emailed me. We don't talk very often, and he was like, "Dude, you went viral on Hacker News," and I was like, "What?" Anyway, yeah. So I made the front page rather. So which is, as far as I'm concerned, is probably is that's the peak. That's the peak right here. Everything down here, what you're watching now, is like ooh down. Okay. Anyway, moving on. I probably should have just swallowed my technical part and stayed at the luxury lighting company. I would have been unhappy from a technical perspective because that job was very distressing from a technical perspective. You know, but and for what it's worth, I'm also unhappy from a technical perspective now, just for very different reasons, right? The truth is, though, that job would have made for a nice, long, and comfortable exit ramp from this career. But I made a different choice, and instead I'm here now writing this particular post. Is this a cycle? Hell yeah, it is. Is it vicious? You bet your ass. But that's not the fault of my current employer, more like a clinical observation of how this industry tends to work. We claim to always be reinventing ourselves, but if you are at all familiar with our history, you know that's yet another lie that we tell ourselves. What we really do is unleash new things upon the world, which create a litany of unintended problems, and then unleash new things that purport to solve those problems. It's very cyclical. Like it's almost ridiculous. It's almost like you can see like the AI bubble is really at its absolute peak right now, and the cracks are everywhere. The signs of this thing about to pop are everywhere, as an example. But already you can see the industry starting to lay the groundwork for the pivot, because this, the one thing before some tech bullshit fest is about to blow up in everyone's face, is the money starts to move and the groundwork for the pivot gets laid, right? And so right now, the pivot they're attempting to lay on some level is the use of local AI, local LLMs. But the reality is they've completely fucked that path over because they got so greedy and so ridiculous with this thing. Nobody can afford to buy that hardware. RAM prices are through the roof. SSD prices are through the roof. GPU prices are through the roof. Everything is too much. And to buy a computer that's actually capable of running, has enough fast RAM to run one of those local models, a decent one, is a massive cost outlay. I mean, I'm an owner of 2 framework desktop machines, which ironically are computers that are capable of running those local models. I don't have the highest tier one. Every time you see a YouTube video for one of these things, a review, it's always the 128 gig model. I don't need 120 gigs RAM. Holy shit. I mean, I don't even really need 32 nowadays with what I'm doing. But instead, I have a 64 gigabyte framework desktop. 2 of them, actually. One's my console, the other's the machine I'm doing this work on, and my primary personal machine in my office, right? And the reason I like them is low powered, right? And 64 gigs of RAM. Why did I buy that model instead of 32 gig of RAM model? Because the 64 gigs of RAM model has the better GPU, and the same GPUs in the 128 gig model. So I wanted as much efficient GPU power I could get my hands on. I needed to outlay for the 64 gigs of models to get it, and these will run local LLMs. I just don't, because it's AI, it's crap. Okay, like I don't need it. And it's not that I haven't played around with some of the local stuff. I don't care. it's I don't care, and that's gonna kill so many people. But it's the truth. I really just don't care. All right, so on a larger scale, tech goes through cycles of centralization and decentralization. We are now in the midst of a rather long cycle of centralization, as evidenced by the fact that big tech basically now has their fingers in every pie. They have accomplished this by convincing the vast majority of people in this industry that they can't succeed without indulging some number of big tech parasites and middlemen who gorge themselves on our collective posterior via notions like the cloud and AI. If that sounded like I'm implying that the industry has turned into a parasitic creature in need of a host for sustenance, then let me apologize. I didn't mean to imply it. I meant to directly state it, because that's what we have become. That's exactly what we have devolved into. The worst part is we don't even know what we are and what we've become. Most of us are blissfully unaware of this, and it's just so sad. Like we really have, we've gotten, as the drug dealers might put it, we've gotten higher on our own supply. And the thing is, the reason we feel this way is because, just like I said, we are just as dependent on the industry as our customers are now. right? There's no cloud SaaS company that doesn't depend on another cloud provider. There should be, but there's not. You would think that in a competitive market, some participants would rise above the fray and be smart enough to zig while everyone else is zagging. But not nowadays, not in tech. Tech is one big game of follow the leader. Once something becomes a trend, all of these motherfuckers running these places just flock to it because they're bereft of creativity. They're bereft of technical ideas. They don't really want to spend the time getting involved enough with their customers to identify problem points that they could produce products to solve. They're not interested in that. They would rather sell you hype, and that's what they do. And they convince everyone that the hype is not just hype, but it's the real deal. And here we are. This is how that ends. Like, everybody is hooked into AWS or Azure or some such nonsense, right? Everybody is using AI in this industry at this point. They really are, right? And there's a handful of holdouts like myself, and there's probably a few companies here and there run by holdouts like myself. So bravo, really. But they are the exception that basically proves the rule at this point. You know, I know a lot of people at work who don't like it but go along with it because, you know, and it's just, we'll get to that actually. So let's return to the story for the moment around the incident at work that inspired this post. While I was deep within one of the pockets of chaos that threatened to smother me this past week, I made the following statement in a Slack channel. I would rather it not work at all than be incorrect. That's what I said. That was not really a statement that was received as well as I would like. Now, it was surrounded by other statements that made it less palatable. I'm a purveyor of fine language and bad language, right? And I have no qualms with using both at the same time. However, this statement reflects a core tenet of my approach to this work. If the output is going to be wrong, then I would rather not produce any output at all. It's either right or it's dead on arrival. And this should be true with everything. But it's infinitely more true, and I do mean my use of the word infinite here, when it involves financial operations. I will leave it at that. However, you know, our customers deserve for it to be right, regardless of what the situation is. We call ourselves engineers, goddammit. That has to fucking mean something. If it doesn't mean that we value correct output over everything else, and largely at the expense of other considerations, then that word is a terrible lie, and we should stop referring to ourselves that way. I mean, you know, a recurring theme in this blog is, what does the word engineer actually mean? What values does that imply or attach to the thing that you are doing? And, you know, I gotta be honest with you, we don't really embody any of those values at this point. We used to partially, but I've always been very reticent of that term, but it's the term that we have chosen. So at some point, it's like I used to hate the use of the term a hacker, you know, by the media when somebody, you know, commits some sort of computer security thing, right? Because cracker was the term that everyone used to prefer, but the reality is at some point hacker became the word because that's just what people know is that thing, right? So at some point you just call it, right? We're engineers. I don't like the use of the word, and I'm always going to take issue with it, right? In any event, our team was not responsible for the inaccuracy I was referring to in this conversation. Thus, it was not something I or my team could fix. The statement I quoted above was my final attempt to convince the manager of the team who was responsible for the inaccuracy to actually do something about it now, rather than promising to maybe look at it later. I failed to accomplish that goal. Right? That's because this belief in my need to state it is one of many ways in which my obsolescence rears its ugly head dozens of times each day. The mantra of this industry has become, sit down, be quiet, and do what we tell you to do. Anyone who knows me knows that this was never going to be my shtick, because I'm simply incapable of working that way, and I won't make any apologies for it either. If you want to build solutions to problems, then the first step towards success will always be to identify the problems. But nowadays, people don't seem to care about the real identifiable problems, but rather seem content to invent fake problems to address. But why is that? I believe a lot of it revolves around our embrace of the cloud and AI. Both of these choices have injected more uncertainty, so much so that uncertainty has now become the default state rather than an exceptional state we try to avoid. Cloud services go down all of the time. If your company depends on a few dozen of these things, chances are that at any given time, at least one of them is only semi-functional, if at all, and probably more than one on some days. We've all been there. We've all seen it, right? You can go to Down Detector, and if AWS US East data center has a fucking outage, like half the internet just goes right there. Like, yeah, whoa, gotta love the decentralized nature of this fucking shit, don't you? In any event, you know, if one of our AWS dependencies do go down at any place where I work, it just becomes, it's not necessarily like, oh my God, we need to figure out what to do about this AWS problem. No, it turns in immediately into how do we manage customer expectations. And that is done primarily by placing the blame on AWS and saying, look, it's not us. How's it not us? We made the choice to put our shit there, knowing full well what would happen. Don't we deserve to eat some of the shit that comes with it? We should. Anyway, while the embrace of the cloud was a bad decision, the embrace of AI is so beyond the pale that I believe it tends to destroy whatever remnants of old school, of old school fundamentals still exists in this trade. Whereas the cloud increased our tolerance for downtime quirks and general chaos, AI triples down on all of it. You can argue and prove that AI is wrong a lot of the time. Nobody cares. It was right a handful of times, and that's all that matters. You can argue and prove that AI is overtly making other people's lives worse. Nobody cares. They all continue to hit the proverbial easy button because it's easier, regardless of how many other people are fucked over because of it. At the end of the day, what this really means is that big tech has completed its metamorphosis from a provider of useful tools into a festering den of institutionalized uncertainty. The new business model involves selling you solutions to problems they themselves created. It's basically a new age form of the old school snake oil salesman. Despite the best efforts of a few and proud individuals willing to push back on this, the industry has clearly made its choice. Most of the actual technical people at this point have decided that it's easier to go along for the ride rather than attempt to uphold the principles of the past. Look, I get it, and I strongly sympathize with your positions. We are all wage slaves. We all have families to provide for, obligations to meet, and mortgages to pay. I wish more of us would stand up for our values, but that would require us to have fostered an attachment to those values to begin with. Perhaps that was just something that deranged people like myself did. And I mean deranged because, I'm going to lose my career for these values. But the reality is, without those values, I don't want this career. And I think that's the part that people don't understand. This isn't about me keeping you. This is about you keeping me, right? So how did we get here? The MBAs, the Masters of Business Administration degree holders, let's be clear, are how we got here. They are the constant that affected this that allowed this line of thinking to spread so far and so wide that has infected virtually every tech company you can think of. The worst part is that we let them do it to us. Each time I think about this, I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes from the movie Trainspotting, which, to note, I am going to read this, but it just will not carry the same impact without the original Scottish. And I am not going to besmirch the Scottish culture by attempting to fake that part, okay? They're just wankers. We, on the other hand, are colonized by wankers. Can't even find a decent culture to be colonized by. We're ruled by effete arseholes. It's a shite state of affairs to be in, Tommy, and all the fresh air in the world won't make any fucking difference. And if you've never seen Trainspotting, go watch it. It's one of my favorites. It's totally off the wall and completely fucked up. It's basically a movie about a bunch of heroin addicts, but fucking brilliant work, that film. Anyway, the MBAs are the wankers, and we let them colonize us, the software engineers. It's truly a pathetic state of affairs. That is the short and sweet version of the story around how their love affair with gaslighting and uncertainty has now become our love affair with those things. So where does that leave me and those like me? In a word, fucked. At least in the short term. I have been and continue to be obsolete, but that obsolescence is eating away at my mental state as I try and fail to combat the forces that amplify it at every workday for what has now become an endless series of painful weeks that all blur together in a growing amorphous blob of trauma. Amusingly enough, I pay a therapist to help guide me through navigating that trauma. That poor woman even reads my blog posts, as they serve as a relatively decent indicator of what the trajectory of my mental state is whenever we meet. So why am I here yet again lamenting about my plight to the void we call the internet? Well, it's because I'm quite sure that I'm not the only one. There are others. Most of us are just afraid to say the things I've said here, because saying those things runs the risk of getting a proverbial scarlet letter permanently fixed to your professional reputation. The good news is that I can say those things now because I just don't care about that reputation anymore. You know, somebody has to sling truth in the face of collective insanity, regardless of the costs, and I'm happy and crazy enough to be that person. On some level, though, even I have to grin when staring down the barrel of the irony birthed from the fact that this industry's institutionalized uncertainty has now created an entire sea of uncertainty. This is the sea that I feel like I'm drowning in despite my years-long campaign to avoid it. I think the lesson is that if you become affixed to a particular group of people, as I am affixed to tech, right? Eventually, the aura spawned by their collective choices, whether it is good or bad, will eventually become your own. Eventually, you'll end up exactly where I am now. You either have to accept that or make a different choice. This perhaps is more. Ooh, that's a bit of a grammar error I should fix. This is perhaps more eloquently stated in a quote from Kurt Vonnegut's novel Mother Light. Short and sweet. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be. To put it bluntly, in the end, if you let the wankers colonize you, they are going to win. Damn shame that. The good news is that the economic realities of our system will eventually reassert themselves in such a way that the wankers are going to find themselves having to defend a lot of very stupid decisions they have made as of late. Given their general lack of empathy and intelligence, I believe they will fail miserably at that, and a lot of them will end up displaced from the industry as well. And although I didn't write this part, let's be clear, most of these assholes have golden parachutes, so it's not like they're going to go hungry. I mean, you know, it's just so sad that these people are going to ultimately be rewarded for being this stupid. But that is the system that we are living in right now. We have put rich, powerful people on a pedestal, no matter how incompetent and indulgent they are, and we're paying the price. We absolutely are. In any event, this will not last. We will reach the other side. When we get there, we will have the chance to change things, and it is vital that we do not drop the ball when that opportunity presents itself. I may not be there, and by that I mean not directly part of the industry to be part of that, but regardless, I will continue to look forward to that day. The tech industry can be better than this, but we can only get there collectively. To do that, we must displace the wankers. In any event, thanks for spending some time with me, and I hope you found this just as entertaining to view and to listen to as I found to make it. And yeah, I'll see y'all next week, next couple weeks. I don't know. Whenever I get around to writing something, I'll get around to filming something on it. So, peace out. See ya.